Hi, my name is Jordan O'Connor. Welcome to The Existential Coach. This week I talked with a good friend of mine, Michel about his experience with neuroendocrine cancer and the long road in understanding what it is and coming to the point recently where he underwent surgery to deal with the tumors and to set him on a path of recovery. A path that has also given him a focus, realizing that there's a great deal that is not known about this form of cancer and a great deal of misdiagnoses that arises as a result of this. And so we begin our talk with him sharing a little bit about dealing with this unknown illness for many years and how that impacted him and what he did to try and understand what was going on.
Because there's not a lot of reports now, there's not a lot of information about it. So patients and public in general and the medical community is not very aware of it. And because of it, it's very easily misdiagnosed. So in my case, I spent a few years that I was diagnosed with IBS. And there was a suspicion of Crohn's disease and gastritis and a lot of other conditions that this type of cancer, the symptoms are very similar. No, it kind of mimics. Every time I went to the doctor, I kept telling him, like, you know what, there is something else. This is not what it is. But he was convinced that it was a case of IBS. So I went through all the treatments for IBS. I went through the diet. It's a specific diet for IBS called a low FODMAP. So I did everything, but there was no improvement. It was never getting better. Like it was either the same or sometimes even getting worse. So I started pushing the doctor, and doctors sometimes they can be really hard to convince that they're wrong, especially by a patient, right? Because a lot of times happens that patients Google stuff, go to the internet and they Google stuff and they get to their own conclusions. But most of the time, those conclusions are wrong. Most of the time, the doctor is right. But there are occasions where the patient might know a little bit more about the body, like our bodies, right? We know how we feel, we know what we feel, and even though sometimes it's a little bit hard to describe like perfectly what it is that we're feeling, we have a pretty good idea, and we can notice when the treatments don't work. So I started like pushing the doctor for different tests for a different diagnostic. But he was not listening to me until one day I got a little pissed off. I told him like straight away, like, look, what you're telling me to do, I've done it to the letter. I follow all your instructions to the letter, and there's no results. So you have to assume that you're wrong. I'm sorry, but we have to come to that conclusion. You are wrong. This is not what I have. So we need to look further. We need to like explore other possibilities because this is not working. So finally he agreed and ordered some different tests. And that's when we discovered the neuroendocrine tumors, which is the name of the thing that I live with.
Michel and I talk a little bit about this in a moment, but one of the things that really struck me was how systematic Michel was in doing these diets and doing the treatments for IBS and being very meticulous in how he did the treatment, collected data about the treatment, and then went to the doctor and said, this is what's happening. I have done what you have said and it is not working. And I think Michel's point about what we know on our body combined with the insight and the methodology that he brought to how he approached this problem is something that's pretty empowering. And I must say that I was very impressed because in all honesty, I really don't think I would have been the same thing. And this is something we will talk a little bit about as the interview unfolds. But I just want to draw your attention to this idea of body wisdom and then this being methodical about understanding our experience.
Being diagnosed with cancer is always a shock. And especially because when you're told you have cancer, that's pretty much what you're told at that moment. Because there's further testing needed to determine the specifics of your case. Cancer, and especially neuroendocrine cancer, there is a lot of different types, and there is a lot of different variables that can determine how aggressive your disease is, how it's going to be treated. There's a lot of things that make a difference. So at the moment that I was told you have cancer, and that's it, and because my doctor didn't know about the condition, he was not very aware. He literally told me, I have no idea what this is, but it looks like cancer. So then the mind starts going crazy, right? Because that lack of information, your imagination starts running. And the first things that we think is, that's it, I'm done. That's the end of it.
So here's this moment, you get this information from the doctor, and all you're left with, the only real information you have, is whatever is running through your mind. And you think, that's it, that's all I have. And Michel builds upon this, bringing in this methodology, this approach systematically.
Eventually, when you start getting more tests and you get a biopsy done, and the biopsy determines a lot of things, like in the case of neuroendocrine cancer, it determines the grade of the tumor, and the grade is how fast the cells are reproducing and growing. And if it's a very fast growing, then the cells look very different one from the other one, because it's growing so fast that they don't have time to copy themselves exactly. So they look very different from one another one. So this is called that it's poorly differentiated. So that means that it's very fast growing tumors. And on the other side, if the cells look alike, all of them, that means that the tumors are growing slowly, so the cells have time to replicate themselves exactly. And this makes a tumor not as aggressive and not as dangerous. So then you start learning about it, and things start changing a little bit, depending on the specifics of your case. But in general, yes, it is a shock, because you don't know what to expect at first. And as I said, your imagination immediately just starts going off.
You talked about hearing stage 4 and that being this title, the tsunami.
Yes.
Yet later you found what that means can be confusing. Do you want to talk a little bit about what stage 4 means?
Yeah, sure. Most of us, and I mean me included, like before I was diagnosed, when we hear stage 4 cancer, we immediately think of it as like the person is in a hospital bed, dying. Like there is nothing else to do. It's like the last thing we hear, like, oh, this guy has stage 4 and we want to call him and say goodbye, pretty much. It's very shocking, because at that moment, again, you don't really know what's going on, and you hear you have stage 4. And first of all, it's like, how can I have stage 4 if I'm like walking and I have a life like pretty normal, like other than the symptoms that you're having? And in most cases, it can be pain, and the symptoms are very different. First is like, how is it possible that I have stage 4 when like I don't feel like I'm dying? Then you start learning that the classifications of the cancer, like how the stages are, like what the meaning is. It's very weird, because stage from 1 to 3 it's almost the same thing. And then there is a big leap into stage 4. Stage 1, 2, and 3, pretty much, the tumor is localized. It's in one place, right? It's in situ is how it's called. That means it's in the place where it originated. And the difference between 1, 2, and 3 is how it has expanded to the tissues around that site, the originating site. And once it moves to a different site, then it's called stage 4. This doesn't really mean that you are bordering dead. That doesn't mean that it's untreatable. That doesn't mean that it's incurable. That just means that it has gone to a different organ to where it originated. Most of the people with stage 4 cancer, they're still fully functional and they can live a normal, relatively normal life the time they're diagnosed. And depending again on the specifics of the case, you can live with stage 4 cancer for decades.
So one thing that impressed me is how informed you got yourself. Because when we hear stage 4, when we hear that we have cancer, as you said, that your mind can become completely overwhelmed by that experience. And when your mind is overwhelmed, it's not the greatest time to say, you know what, now I think I'm going to do some research. Because you're just in a panic state. So how did you get yourself into a mindset where you did start researching and learning about what cancer is, what the process is, what all of these things could be, and then, because you were so systematic, and then how you could develop and find the right doctor, which we'll come to. But I'm just curious, how did you shift your mindset?
You're right. No, when you're overwhelmed, it's hard to think clearly and hard to make any decisions that will move you forward. I went through stages, right? Psychological stages, I like to call them that way, where like the first thing that you experience is fear, panic. It's like, like I'm done. I'm not going to be able to do anything else with my life. And then you get pissed off because how can this be happening to me? How is it that it was not detected earlier? And then you get depressed, you get sad, like my life is over and stuff like that. Maybe I have the fortune that, number one, I've always been a very curious person. I like knowing how everything works. I am that kind of person that if I buy a television, even though I know how to turn it on and how to operate it, I will read the manual. I read the manual for everything because I just like knowing how things work. The same way every time I get curious about it, okay, how does the air conditioning makes the air cold? I go and I Google and I find it because I like doing that. So when this happens, you start thinking, okay, cancer. We all know like a little bit of like the basics of cancer, right? Cancer, it's like an abnormal, out of control growth of the cells. But then you start thinking, okay, it's happening inside me. Or that's what I started thinking. It's happening inside me. I need to learn why it's happening, how it's happening. And since I was not really told a lot of what was going on because my doctor, again, he didn't know about the condition, and at this point, I don't know who to go to. Where, like, I need solutions, right?
In that moment, when we're experiencing the shock of something like cancer, and we try and find a way to understand what's going on, we will, as Michel spoke about, go through these stages. And as he moved through these stages, he seemed to get himself to this place of curiosity. And so I was wondering, as Michel was talking, how this role of curiosity was a kind of olive branch that brought him out of the experience that this is the end of my life, that that the story is coming to an end, and moved him into this realm of curiosity as to, well, what is this experience?
That curiosity kind of like overpowers the everything else that you're feeling. And in my case, satisfying that curiosity gives me a little bit of peace, gives me tranquility, like because then I know what's going on, then I know how it works. And understanding the mechanism of anything helps you find solutions to whatever the problem is. So yes, I went through all the depression and all the fear and all the anger and everything, but that curiosity was always there. So I started searching and searching and searching. And then eventually I found somebody that knew about the disease. Luckily, it's a friend of mine. It's a person that's been a friend of mine for many years. And he's a doctor, so I thought, like, I'm going to send him my results because my doctor's not telling me anything. I can't find anything on the internet because I don't know what I'm looking for. So I need somebody that I need to find for answers. So I sent this friend of mine my test results, and he calls me back, and he asked me one question. He says, like, are you having this symptom? Are you having face flushings? I said, yes. And he immediately said, you know what? I know exactly what it is. It's actually my specialty. So I was very, very lucky on that, in that aspect. So he lives in Vancouver. So he says to me, and you know what? There's one specialized clinic in Toronto. It's the only one in its kind in the country. I used to work there. I know everybody there. I'm going to send them your test results, and they'll be in touch with you. Pretty much at the same time, like this, I think the same day or the day after, I had an appointment with my oncologist here in Hamilton. So I mentioned to him this clinic, and he asked me, do you want to be transferred to that clinic? I'm like, of course I want to be transferred to that clinic, because the oncologist, this is not my family doctor. This is the oncologist that my family doctor referred me to. Again, he didn't know a lot about the disease. He knew of it, but the first thing he told me is like, this is inoperable. Pretty much he told me all that is to do is to wait for you to die, and to make your life as pleasurable as possible and as painless as possible while you're still here.
So here again, Michel is confronting this voice that's saying you have cancer, you have stage 4 cancer, even voices that are saying, doctors who are saying, I don't really know what this is, but this is where you're at. And as with him contacting his friend and as with him pushing, he seemed to just trust his curiosity as this agent of change that, as he said, gave him a sense of peace and gave him a sense of tranquility. So in following that inner sense, he pushed past these doctors.
And a couple days later, I get a call from the clinic. It's called the Susan Leslie Clinic for Neuroendocrine Tumors, and it's part of Sunnybrook. So they called me. They say they received my tests, and they're going to schedule an appointment. Immediately right there, they order a biopsy, they order a CT scan, and they order a very specialized scan that involves a radioactive element. So you're injected with a small dose of a very low radioactive element, gallium, and this element attaches itself to the cells, to the neuroendocrine cells. And when they take the image in the CT scan, these cells are shining, are luminescent because of the radioactive element. So that way they can see exactly where the tumors are, the size, and determine all the specifics of the case. So after that, there is a pretty good picture of what's going on inside. And then you start getting more information. And then you know, okay, it's neuroendocrine cancer. It's grade 1. The primary site, no, it's in my small bowel, which is one of the most common sites for neuroendocrine cancer to develop. So then you can start doing your research more focused to the specifics of your case, which is a better thing to do than just go and Google blindly stuff, because you can get in a lot of trouble.
And this focus, because you mentioned to me before how experiences in the past of depression actually became beneficial, like that you became to understand a relationship with your mind and your moods that you used in this situation.
Yes, yeah. That's very true. Like I've dealt with certain amount of depression pretty much most of my life, and understanding that, again, when I realized and I accepted that I was dealing with depression, I got curious about it, and I had the need to understand how depression worked and why was it that I was feeling the way that I was feeling.
Here we intersect with this idea of acceptance that we hadn't touched upon before, that I think is really important, that shift from the crisis moment of hearing that you have stage 4 cancer, or hearing that you were up against this life and death thing, that by shifting into this, okay, I'm accepting that that's what I'm hearing, I'm accepting that that's what it is, and then turning that into, or churning that into a curiosity, seems to be the way in which Michel was able to reorganize and then get back to who he is. As he said, I've always been a curious person.
You understand that depression is not about the way that you live your life. Depression is not about your success or your failures. Depression is not about the people that is around you. Depression it's a chemical imbalance in your brain. Once I understood that, then I was able to manipulate my thoughts in a way that it was like when I was feeling down and when I was feeling depressed, and you start going into like a vice circle because you're depressed and you don't understand why you're depressed, and not understanding why you're depressed makes you think that you're defective or that you're damaged. So that depresses you even more, and then you question again, why am I feeling like this? And again, so it's a circle. But once you understand why depression happens, in my case, I was able to stop the circle by saying, okay, these feelings that I'm having is not because of something that I'm doing wrong, and it's not because me as a person, there's something wrong as the way that I am. It's a physical problem. So it's not real. What I'm feeling is actually not real. It's a consequence of a little substance that is missing in my brain. I was able to change the direction of my thoughts and to go to somewhere else, to start thinking, okay, this is not real. This is my brain telling me, playing games with me. So I need to think differently. So I started thinking, okay, this is not happening. Is my brain playing games? I'm actually fine. And then you start looking for the reasons why you think that you're actually fine. Let's see. I have good friends. I love my job. I have a wife. I have a cat. So thinking positively makes you go to that direction. So it's a lot easier to get out of it. So when you get the diagnosis and you start feeling like, oh my God, it's the end of my life, it's the end of my life, you start using that same approach and thinking, okay, it's not the end of my life, right? It's a condition that I have to adapt to, that I have to learn to live with now and adapt to and fight, because I'm not gonna let it defeat me as easily. It might defeat me at the end, because cancer, the reality is that it's an incurable disease and it's a terminal disease. That's the reality of it. But that doesn't mean that I'm just going to sit and feel sorry for myself while it happens.
And that's what struck me is you recognize there is this reality, this inescapable reality. Yet at the same time, you are curious and you are also thinking, how can I shift my thinking? So in spite of the reality, you see it as I'm still going to choose. I'm still going to make a decision.
Of course, I'm not gonna let the disease drive my life, because if you do that, the outcome is not gonna be good. If you let yourself be controlled by the situation that you're living in, and this doesn't only apply for a disease, it applies in a lot of different contexts. If you let yourself be driven by the situation, you're not going to go where you want to go. You're going to go where that situation takes you.
This is something I want to focus a little on, because there can be this idea of choice and determinism and reality, and there's these circumstances that are inescapable, therefore we should just accept. And of course, acceptance is an important part, as we discussed earlier, of really seeing what the situation is. And in accepting, we're moving out of this panic state into a contemplation state to really actually see, as opposed to simply react. Yet, the question of choice can sometimes be rebuked by saying, well, I don't really have a choice. If I've got a terminal illness, so there's no choice, there's therefore no point. But as Michel says, you are going to be driven in a direction that you do not want to go. And that's where the question of choice enters again. It's not so much the deterministic perspective that, of course, we will die, cancer will happen, some form of ending or termination of our life will happen. But in terms of how we relate to that experience, we can choose within those parameters. So, do we choose?
Even though, like, my situation is going to take me to the only place that it can take me, I'm going to choose how I'm going to get there. And I mean, at the end of the day, we're all going to get there. It's not that I am going to die because I have cancer and you're not, because you don't, right? Like, we're all going to go there. We're all going to get to that point sooner or later. The big difference is that now I have a very good idea of what might be the cause of my death, that what will possibly be the cause of my death. Again, it's not a sure thing, because I can just go outside and get hit by a truck. We never know. But having that assurance, kind of, it shifts also your thoughts, the way that you see life, the way that you see things.
This next point really struck me.
The more I live with this and the more I learn about it, the more I've been able to see it a little bit as a blessing, a little bit as a good thing. It has given me a purpose for something that I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help more people. I've always wanted to help. I've always had that little thing to teach people, to show them how to do things differently. So now I found a reason and a theme to talk about, right? And at the same time, it makes you realize that we can't give everything for granted. Like, life it's very fragile. I mean, this is a cliche. Everybody says it. No, life, it's so fast and so fragile. But nobody really understands it profoundly. Like, not everybody, not nobody, but not everybody understands it the way it really is. It's like there's another thought that we all have, and it's like, yeah, I'm gonna die one day. We all have that thought, but we never really think it's going to happen to me. We always see it as a distant thing that might happen one day, but we never see it as a reality. It is going to happen. So having cancer kind of puts a limit to that, to where my imagination goes, right? It's like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna die, but it's not like I might die one day. No, I'm gonna die, and it's probably going to be sooner than later. So you adapt your life to it, to that thought. No, it's like, okay, plans that I had for next year or for 2 years, why wait if I can do them now? Plans that I have for 10, 15 years, maybe they're not realistic. So why bother, right? Or maybe they are realistic, but maybe I can do them quicker. So why wait? Let's do them now. Or maybe a plan that of something that I wanted to do tomorrow, that it was going to take, like, I was going to start it tomorrow and it was going to take years, and maybe I was not going to be able to finish it. Then maybe that shouldn't be a priority. So it kind of shifts everything. And in my case, as I said, it's given me a purpose, and it's given me a lot of strength and a lot of like will to live, even though it's ironic how knowing that you're going to die soon, which is not my case. Hopefully I'm not going to die soon, but knowing that that is closer than what you imagined gives you a big push to try to just enjoy whatever time you have left.
So the pressure and the paradox shakes us out of the delays and the avoidance.
Yeah. Because you realize that we don't have the time, like, guaranteed. And I think now I would say time is one of the things that we give most for granted, that we shouldn't, and that we have the least of. And time it's like a non-renewable thing. Like, once the time is over, it's over. The time is gone, it's gone. And once your time is over, it's over. That's it. There's no way back.
And the paradox being is this focus actually makes you appreciate time more.
Yes, exactly. Knowing that it's like, knowing that I have less time makes me appreciate it and enjoy it more.
As we kind of come to the close here, I wonder if we circle around to humor, because I know humor has been a major way that
I've been holding back for all this podcast.
Yeah, holding back. Well, we got to save the humor. But you said to me right early on, you said, I need humor to be a part of this experience. I can't have humor because I have cancer. I can't stop joking.
Yes.
So to me, what struck me was the sense of, I need to keep living. I'm a person who jokes around, and that's who I am. And if I stop being that person, that's going to scare me. So I need to be who I am. And I'm now a person who likes to joke around, who has cancer. So this is what it looks like. Do you want to talk about that connecting of who you are and cancer?
Yes, like, humor has been always a very important part of my personality. And I've always been very, very sarcastic. And I've always had a pretty dark humor. And one thing that it's a characteristic of Mexican culture, we like to make fun of our tragedies. Every time something bad happens in Mexico, it's an hour after it has happened, and you can start finding jokes about it everywhere. No, it's part of my culture. And I like it, because I think that if you're able to make fun of yourself, that helps you accept the whatever it is that you're dealing with. And also, it allows your brain to shift from a negative place to a positive place, because laughter, it's well known and very well documented that laughter makes the body produce certain hormones that stimulate you in a positive way. So laughing about your tragedies, I think it's a really, really good way to get over them and to, like, move forward. So yes, like, from day one, I started making jokes about it. Like, my brother it's probably 3 times more sarcastic than me. After I told my brother was the first person that I told him about it. And after I told him, next time I call him, he answers the phone saying, like, hey, are you dead yet? And we just started laughing. And that, because when I called him, I was like, I was not in a good spot. Like, I just learned about cancer and I need to talk to somebody, and I'm like all mortified. And he answers the phone that way, and I immediately start laughing, and immediately my whole mentality, my whole attitude changes. It's relaxed. It's like everything changes. So it's very important to learn to see things with humor. I was told that this was a very serious podcast, so I try not to do anything that would possibly make somebody laugh and you will lose your audience. So I was trying to behave.
Who told you it was a serious podcast?
You did.
You didn't even listen to the podcast before. You said, I want to be on your podcast. I asked you if you'd heard the podcast. You said no.
But I will listen to it now that I'm on it.
So you listen to podcasts you're on. I think that's a good rule of, for people to follow, is be involved in the things that you're involved in.
Yes. Yeah. It helps. Like, I mean, it's probably not going to be for everybody. Like, I've encountered people that I walk into a room, like after I was diagnosed. Sometimes I walked into a room and I made a joke about how I'm dying, right? And some people get it, some people finds it very uncomfortable. And I mean, there is no right or wrong. It's just how people take things. It's different. But I think it's more beneficial than not to be able to be open to humor and to be able to laugh at yourself, at your own tragedies. Don't laugh at somebody else's tragedies unless that person is on the same channel and can deal with it. But from a first person point of view, I think it's important to be able to do it because it just helps you. It changes your mindset and it helps you relax and accept the condition, which is one of the most important steps towards any kind of improvement, any kind of psychological or emotional improvement. The first and most important steps is to accept that you have a problem or a condition.
As we came to the end of the episode, I asked Michel if there's anything he wanted to send us off with, and this is what he had to say.
I think basically I would like to convey the message of it doesn't really matter how big your problems are. I think what matters is how you face them. When we face our problems, like when we front them and face them directly, we will most likely find the solution. And even problems that seem to have no solution, like cancer, you will find ways around it, and you will find ways to not let yourself down, because that's what we should all aim for, to be as happy as we can and just enjoy life, because again, it's very fragile, it's very short. Now I know.
Thanks, man.
Thank you, man.
So, as I think about that conversation I had with Michel and moving from the shock of finding out you have stage 4 cancer to the curiosity, which is really fundamental to how Michel thinks about the world and engages with the world, and how humor is a way to open oneself to the experiences that are clearly overwhelming. And through all of this, there's this acceptance. This is a way to see our experience and to, as you said, front or face our experience. And when we do that, there may be more to the experience than we had first thought. And by shifting our thinking about it, we may actually find, as Michel found, this paradoxical power in the realization of death. So I want to thank Michel for talking to me. You can find him on Facebook. There'll be information on the show info about links and so on. You can reach out to him, connect. I know he's working very hard to get more information about neuroendocrine cancer and tumors and what that means and how there's not enough information, not enough support groups. And so he very much wants to connect people. And I think you get a sense of that from this podcast, of how important relationships are, how important humor is, how important curiosity is, how important awareness and acceptance are. And that by engaging these things face on, we can find things within these relationships that can help us to face what is the inevitable experience of our dying, but do so with humor and insight and curiosity. So thanks again to Michel for speaking with me. Until next time, bye for now.